Hi, I'm Erin Klein. I'm a mom first, I'm an elementary teacher, and I'm also a national keynote speaker and an author. So I want to share one of my passions with you today, and that's really just giving the classroom back to the kids. You know, there's one teacher in the room, but there's a number of kids. And I think when I became a mom, I really started thinking differently about teaching. So something that really struck me is when I went from being a first grade teacher to becoming a middle school teacher. So I was a first grade teacher my very first year of teaching, and I came to expect kids to ask a lot of curious questions and to really fall in love with learning. But when I went to the middle school, I was shocked at the amount of silence in the room. Of course, the kids were very talkative in the hallway, but it was like as soon as the bell stopped or the music stopped, they just stared at you. And so I started having really rich conversations with my students about, you know, why aren't you asking questions? Why aren't you interested? And they said, Mrs. Klein, you're the only one that really wants us to talk. You're just supposed to give us the information. And, you know, I really thought long and hard about that. And I said, no, like you guys are the ones who are supposed to fuel this conversation and, you know, ignite these conversations and discussion. And so we really started to think deeply about our practice together and creating and developing lessons. So really just giving the classroom back to the students. And when I became a mom, you know, I realized that every single student in my classroom truly was someone else's entire world. And I want to be the type of teacher that I want for my own Jacob and my own Riley to have in the classroom. So I want them to ask curious questions. I want them to have just this innate love for learning. So what better way to do that than really incorporate the student voice into the classroom? One of the greatest things that I did in all of my teaching years was I came back from an ed camp, which is a really great model if you've never been to one of the conferences. There's not a prearranged schedule beforehand, but it's kind of from the mindset of the smartest person in the room is the entire room itself. So collecting everyone's voice and really validating that. And so there's not a schedule ahead of time. Teachers and educators from all over will show up to a location for an ed camp, and they decide that day, what is it that you want to learn about? What do you know about? What can you share? So I learned so many things this day and this weekend. So when I came back to the classroom, it was on a Saturday. I had all of my second graders sitting around, and I said, oh, guys, I went to another conference this weekend and they were so used to me sharing ideas. Usually it was an app that we could try or something. And so I started telling them about this. And they said, oh, Mrs. Klein, when are we going to do that? And I said, to do what? And I said, like the app? Like we could try, no, when are we gonna do the ed camp? And I said, you wanna go to a teacher ed camp on a Saturday? And they said, no, when are we gonna do an ed camp in class? And that's when I thought, like that's really transformative. Like, how about Friday? So it was interesting because the students came with such passions that they were experts in. And we just hosted it inside of our classroom, and they wanted to call it Class Con because they thought as second graders conference was a really big fancy word. And but they shortened it to con because they said, oh, like Comic-Con. So they thought that was really cool being 7. So we called it Class Con, and the kids were the experts that day. They truly shined. They shared their passions. And as a teacher and as educators, you know, we have such a great toolbox. We've been to school for a number of years, many conferences, workshops. So to be able for me to pull the resources and the connections and content to what their passions were, you know, you can teach geometry and math to anything. You just have to really build that relationship with that child and give them a platform to allow their voice to be heard. So when I did that, I think that's when I really started thinking differently about teaching and answering my question, would I want to be a student in my own classroom? The answer after that day was absolutely yes. Like we had fun together. It was fantastic. So when I think about the type of learning environment that I want for my own Jacob and Riley, my own kids to have, it's definitely an environment where the love for learning and their natural curiosity is cherished and enhanced. So I encourage you to try maybe a class con or just do anything simple to really spark that love for learning and ignite those rich conversations, giving the classroom back to the kids.